There is a town in Pennsylvania where the ground has been on fire for more than 60 years. The fire started in 1962. It is still burning right now as you listen to this. It burns beneath empty streets, cracked sidewalks, and the foundations of houses that no longer exist. Smoke drifts out of fissures in the earth. The ground in some places reaches over 900 degrees. The fire covers roughly 400 acres across 4 underground fronts. And according to engineers who have studied it, there is enough coal beneath the surface to keep it burning for another 250 years. The town is called Centralia. Almost everyone who lived there is gone. Centralia sits in the anthracite coal region of northeastern Pennsylvania, about 2 hours northwest of Philadelphia. It was founded in the 1860s as a mining town, and for nearly a century, that is exactly what it was. The coal industry built it. Miners dug thousands of feet of tunnels beneath the town, pulling out anthracite to heat homes and fuel industry across the eastern United States. At its peak in the 1890s, Centralia had over 2,500 residents and 14 active mines. There were churches, hotels, shops, a post office, schools. It was a real town with a real economy and real families who expected it to last. What the miners left behind was a problem that nobody alive in 1962 fully understood. Decades of coal extraction had carved a massive underground network beneath Centralia and the surrounding area. Tunnels connected to tunnels. Shafts opened into chambers that opened into seams that ran for miles. Some of these passages had been mapped, many had not. After the mines closed, some entrances were sealed with incombustible material as regulations required, but others were missed. Bootleg miners, locals who extracted coal illegally from abandoned shafts for personal use or small-scale sale, continued working in some of these tunnels into the early 1960s, sometimes using a dangerous technique called pillar robbing, where they pulled coal from the structural pillars that held up mine roofs. This caused collapses that made the tunnel network even harder to track. By the mid-20th century, the coal industry had declined and most of the mines had closed. The population dropped to around 1,000 by 1960, but Centralia was still a functioning community. People still lived in their homes, attended St. Ignatius Church, shopped on Locust Avenue, and raised their kids in the same houses their parents had grown up in. The abandoned mines beneath them were invisible. Nobody thought about them anymore. On May 27, 1962, the Centralia Borough Council hired 5 volunteer firefighters to clean up the town landfill before Memorial Day. The landfill sat in an old strip mine pit, about 75 feet wide and 50 feet deep. The method they chose for cleaning it up was the same method they had used before. They set it on fire. The fire was supposed to burn itself out. It did not. What nobody realized, or what nobody checked carefully enough, was that the landfill connected to the labyrinth of abandoned mine tunnels underneath the town through an unsealed opening in the pit. The fire found the opening. It found the coal seam, and it went underground. At first, nobody panicked. Small mine fires were not unusual in coal country. Pennsylvania alone had dozens of them burning at any given time. State and federal agencies attempted to dig out the fire and seal off the mine entrances. A contractor named Bridie was hired to excavate the burning area, but the state only allowed him to work daytime shifts on weekdays, and work stopped entirely for 5 days over Labor Day weekend. The fire, of course, did not take weekends off. It was also moving northward, pushing deeper into the coal seam, which meant the excavation had to go deeper and cost more with every passing week. Bridie had removed nearly 59,000 cubic yards of earth by the time the project ran out of money on October 29, 1962. It was not enough. Another attempt involved flushing the mines with a slurry of crushed rock and water. That failed too. A third project tried to dig a trench ahead of the fire to cut it off. That also failed. Between 1962 and 1982, state and federal agencies spent over $7 million trying to put the fire out. None of it worked. The fire kept spreading through the interconnected tunnels, moving deeper and farther from the surface, finding new seams of coal to feed on. Every attempt to contain it assumed the fire was smaller than it actually was. By the time anyone understood the full scope of the tunnel network beneath Centralia, the fire had already reached places that were impossible to access. For nearly 20 years, the people of Centralia lived on top of it. They could smell sulfur. Their eyes burned. Headaches became routine. Carbon monoxide seeped into basements, sometimes reaching dangerous levels, while families slept. Trees in yards began dying from the roots up as the ground beneath them heated. Gardens that had produced vegetables for decades stopped growing anything at all. Steam vents appeared in backyards, hissing columns of hot vapor rising from cracks that had not been there the year before. Roads buckled and cracked as the ground beneath them expanded with heat. In winter, patches of ground that should have been covered in snow stayed bare and warm, the heat from below melting the snow as fast as it fell. Children walked to school past stretches of road where the asphalt was soft underfoot. The smell of rotten eggs hung in the air on still days. But for a long time, many residents believed the fire would be contained. They had been told it would be contained. They stayed. Then came Valentine's Day, 1981. A 12-year-old boy named Todd Domboski was walking through his grandmother's backyard when the ground opened beneath his feet. A sinkhole, 150 feet deep, filled with hot steam and carbon monoxide, swallowed him. He survived only because he grabbed an exposed tree root and held on until his cousin pulled him out. The temperature inside the sinkhole was lethal. If he had fallen, he would have died. That was when the rest of America learned what was happening in Centralia. In 1979, a gas station owner named John Coddington, who also happened to be the mayor, had lowered a dipstick into one of his underground fuel tanks and pulled it out hot. He measured the temperature of the gasoline in the tank at nearly 180 degrees. An underground fuel tank at that temperature is an explosion waiting to happen. But even that had not been enough to force action. It took a child almost falling to his death in a burning sinkhole to get the federal government's attention. In 1984, Congress approved $42 million for relocation. Most residents accepted buyout offers and left. But leaving was not simple. These were families who had lived in Centralia for generations. Some of the houses being demolished had been built by their grandparents. The churches they attended had baptized them, married them, and buried their parents. The buyout money was enough to relocate, but not enough to replace what they were losing. Many families moved to nearby towns like Ashland or Mount Carmel, close enough to drive past what used to be home. They watched the bulldozers take their houses down. They watched the lots get filled with dirt. They watched the town they grew up in get erased, one address at a time. By 1992, Pennsylvania Governor Bob Casey invoked eminent domain on every property in the borough, condemning all remaining buildings. The town's zip code was revoked by the Postal Service in 2002. The portion of Route 61 that ran through Centralia was permanently closed and rerouted. For years after, the abandoned highway became known as the Graffiti Highway, a 3/4-mile stretch of cracked, smoke-stained asphalt covered in spray paint, visited by thousands of tourists and urban explorers, until it was buried under dirt in 2020 to discourage trespassing. A handful of residents refused to leave. They fought the government in court for years. In 2013, the state reached a settlement with the last 7 residents, allowing them to stay in their homes for the rest of their lives. After they die, the properties revert to the state through eminent domain. As of the 2020 census, 5 people still live in Centralia. 5 people, in a town that once had 2,500. If you visit Centralia today, you will find almost nothing. The street grid is still visible, but the houses are gone. Driveways lead to empty lots where foundations have been filled in with dirt. The cemeteries are still maintained, which means there are more dead residents above ground than living ones. St. Ignatius Church is one of the few structures still standing. Low metal steam vents dot the hillside south of town, hissing faintly. If you walk behind the cemetery, you can see smoke rising from cracks in the earth, thin white wisps that look almost peaceful until you remember what they mean. The ground beneath your feet is on fire, and has been for your entire lifetime. The fire is not just a local curiosity, it is an ongoing environmental disaster. The combustion releases carbon dioxide, methane, sulfur dioxide, and mercury into the atmosphere continuously. Fine particulate matter drifts from the vents. The soil above the fire zone is contaminated. Vegetation struggles to grow in areas where the ground temperature is elevated. The fire has also spread beyond Centralia's original boundaries, reaching beneath the nearby village of Burnsville, which also had to be abandoned. As of the most recent monitoring, the fire continues to advance along 4 separate fronts, each one following a different coal seam deeper into the earth. There is no plan to extinguish it, and there has not been a serious plan to extinguish it in decades. The Centralia mine fire was never a natural disaster. It was a series of human decisions, each one small, each one reasonable in isolation, that combined into something irreversible. A town council that cleaned its dump by burning it. A barrier that was supposed to be installed, but was not. A hole that was supposed to be sealed, but was not. A series of containment projects that were underfunded, understaffed, and started too late. By the time anyone treated the fire as a genuine emergency, it had already won. The 2006 horror film Silent Hill drew partial inspiration from Centralia, and it introduced the town to millions of people who had never heard of it. The video game series the film was based on had already used the concept of a burning town shrouded in ash and fog. For gamers and horror fans, Centralia became a kind of real-world myth, a place where the ground itself was hostile, the air was poison, and an entire community had been swallowed by something they could not see or stop. Documentaries have been filmed there. Photographers have made pilgrimages. Urban explorers treat it as a bucket list destination. The graffiti highway before it was buried became one of the most photographed stretches of abandoned road in America. People sprayed their names, their loves, their politics, their jokes onto the cracked asphalt of a road that was closed because the ground beneath it was burning. There is something about Centralia that catches in the imagination and does not let go. Maybe it is because the danger is invisible. You can stand on a street in Centralia and see nothing wrong. The sky is clear, the birds are singing, the trees that survived are green, and 200 feet below you, the earth is on fire. That gap between what you see and what is actually happening is the thing that makes Centralia feel like fiction. But it is not fiction. For the people who actually lived there, it was just the place they lost. Beneath the empty streets of Centralia, Pennsylvania, a fire is still burning. It burned through the Kennedy administration, the moon landing, Watergate, the fall of the Berlin Wall, September 11th, the pandemic, and everything else that has happened in the last 6 decades. It does not care about any of it. It just burns. And unless someone finds a way to stop it, it will still be burning long after everyone who remembers the town is gone. If you want to see more stories about the American places that were lost, subscribe to American Remains.